being here. I've got a little bit of a cold, so I hope you'll excuse my having water here, and hope I make it through this without losing my voice. Today I'm going to talk about vernal pool ecosystems of Baja California. These are one of Baja California's rarest and most threatened ecosystems. Vernal pools are rain-fed, ephemeral wetland ecosystems that occur in all of the Mediterranean-type climates of the world. They'll develop in these Mediterranean climates pretty much anywhere with relatively flat topography that's underlain by some sort of subsurface impermeable layer that precludes the percolation of water to lower soil depths. These are ecosystems that are fascinating to study because they're very seasonal. So in the winter when we receive precipitation, vernal pools will look a lot like this. They'll be inundated for 3 or 4 months out of the year. Of course, botanists are most excited about the flowering phase, which occurs during spring as the pools begin drying down. And they're often characterized by this circular rings of flowers that follow the microtopographical gradient in the pools. And then in the summertime, the only evidence that we have is oftentimes just a barren basin. And so any organism that would occur in a vernal pool must find solutions for dealing with both the inundated phase, possibly 3 or 4 months out of the year, and really 8 or 9 months of very, very dry conditions, often corresponding with hot conditions as well. And this has resulted in the evolution of a very specialized flora and fauna in vernal pools. Vernal pools have a strongly endemic component to their to the flora, and I've listed just a number of our native California genera here that occur in vernal pools and apparently have diversified in vernal pools. But it's not just plants that occur in vernal pools. Of course, there are many animal taxa that rely upon vernal pools for some phase or for their entire life cycle. And most notably, I'd say, are these beautiful fairy shrimp. And in California, Branconecta is the genus that's most diverse with 13 or so taxa. These beautiful fairy shrimp up here. So I got involved in thinking about vernal pools of Baja California when I began my dissertation in 2008. And I study Plagiophotheris, the popcorn flowers, which are ultra diverse in vernal pools of Western North America and South America. And as I began to try to wrap my head around all this taxonomic diversity, I was on the consortium and I was mapping distributions, and I realized that we really don't know much about Plagiophotheris in Baja California. And I began thinking more about this, and I realized it wasn't just Plagiophotheris, we just didn't know anything about vernal pools in Baja California. And so thus this project began. So get you oriented here, the peninsula is about 700 or so miles long. Of course, situated just to the west of mainland Mexico and south of San Diego. The area with the Mediterranean climate is approximately 200 or so miles just south of the San Diego border in the northwest corner. And here's the project motivation in one slide. So in Alta California, I would say that vernal pools are fairly well known. There have been hundreds of studies on vernal pools of Alta California. We know from those studies that the flora is exceptional. It's 91% native or so, mostly annuals, which is uncommon in our flora. A very high degree of endemism, as I've already mentioned. We also know from the efforts of folks like Bob Holland that we've lost, depending upon the county, anywhere from 60 to 98% of our vernal pools. And in San Diego County, just north of Baja California, 98% is the estimated loss. It's hard to fathom, 98% loss of an ecosystem. Not surprisingly, you couple this endemism with the tremendous loss, and you get a number, 28 or so federally listed species and 101 CNPS listed species at my last count. Now the situation in Baja is different. I would argue that they're relatively unstudied or understudied in Baja. We have no idea right now about where vernal pools occur, and we have no estimates of their extent, and we have no idea about how extensive they were historically. And yet this is an area on the northwest corner of Baja California that's rapidly expanding. There was a recent study that focused on land use change across the entire peninsula, and they had focal studies, one of which was in Tijuana. And they estimated that between 1978 and 2003, there's been a 50% conversion of natural land cover classes over to anthropogenic cover classes. 50%. That's an incredible number to think about. And yet, as of when this project began, there was no mechanism for protecting the remaining pools, although we heard Gabby's great talk earlier today, and we may be working on that. So the project goals started out with really just trying to figure out where do vernal pools occur. The idea was to map them and see if we couldn't come up with some sort of hypothesis for where they occurred historically. As we were mapping them and doing some ground truthing, we were cataloging all the plants in the vernal pools, and in 2013 we started gathering the fairy shrimp as well. In 2013, we also added an aspect to gather vegetation data, so we partnered with folks from UC Davis who have an enormous releve data set for North America, minus Baja California. And then finally, none of this makes a difference at all if the ecosystem vanishes under our watch. So we're thinking a lot about conservation, and we have made some progress on 2 things, and 1 thing yet to be determined. So we are standing on the shoulders of Reed Moran, who did pretty much the best work on vernal pools in Baja California to date. It was a paper in 1984, so this is a map from his paper. The areas, some of these include just landmarks like San Felipe, big cities. So the areas with vernal pools that he talked about are these here, and we've been to all of them but Mesa San Carlos in the extreme south. You saw my 2012 talk. This is sort of an update from the last CNPS conference, and the methods are the same. So I relied very heavily initially on Google Earth. It's really changed the way that I do field work these days. Google Earth has. So I did photo interpretation of the entire northwestern part of the peninsula in Google Earth, looking for signatures of presence of vernal pools. When I found something that looked like a vernal pool landscape and that I was interested in exploring further, I sought corroboration of vernal pool presence from these types of sources. And 2 of these things have been so important to this study, I'll just talk about them for another moment. So this high-resolution satellite imagery, again, has just kind of revolutionized the way you might do field botany. This is an image from Google Earth of northern Otay Mesa in San Diego County. And this is an area here that is a mesa top position. You can see intact Nema Mound topography, this kind of dimply topography. And let's say we also had records of vernal pool plants. We went and visited and we found vernal pools. This is easy. I would map as an extant vernal pool landscape. The area next door is a mesa top position also. We see evidence of Nema Mound topography. You can see the cross sections of the Nema Mounds, these circles here, that have been bladed by a piece of heavy machinery. And we also have vernal pool plant records, let's say, and also intact adjacent vernal pools. So this is one I would call a historical vernal pool landscape, an area we know supported vernal pools, but that currently does not support them anymore. A lot for the historical vernal pool landscape estimates, I relied heavily on Reed Moran's field notes that are available through bajaflora.org. All of his field notebooks are scanned and available. If you wanted to, you could go back to the first collection of Pogagini nudiescula from the. Really?
Yeah, we got started late, so
okay.
We can cut questions.
Okay. All right, so if you wanted to, one could go and really retrace Reed's steps and know where he was collecting. This was a big source of data for us. So I'm going to skim through three slides of maps. It's not necessary that you understand these places, but really just soak in the loss that's occurred in this area. That's the only point for these next 3 slides. And so in all cases, areas that I believe were historically supported vernal pools are in light blue polygons. The areas that the nested areas that are in red are areas that still have vernal pools. So this is northern Baja California. Here's the Tijuana area where that 50% of land cover change has occurred. Really just 2 places left there. Valle de las Palmas is an area of tremendous conservation concern. There's still fairly extensive vernal pools there. The central part of the Mediterranean region are actually 2 success stories. The La Misión region still supports vernal pools fairly extensively. And Valle Guadalupe, in Reed's time, it was thought that this area had been completely converted over to agriculture, but because of Google Earth, we've been able to find and actually visit several areas that still support vernal pools in this area. These will probably go away in the next 5 or 10 years under Great Plains, probably. And then finally in the south, Coahuila Mesa is really one of the best areas for seeing vernal pools in Baja California, very biologically important area, but yet really probably a tremendous loss of vernal pools in Coahuila area. And San Quintin, basically 100% loss, but new imagery has revealed some areas of the mesas that we haven't been to that probably support vernal pools. So this is an update from the 2012 talk. Here are the estimates of loss for each one of these regions, and I just hope you'll note that most of these are over 95%. There's a few areas that are around 50% loss or so. Across the peninsula, about a 94% loss, and probably this is conservative. So historically, there's about 35,000 hectares or so using this conservative approach, and about 2,000 or so hectares remain. And just point out that our methodology is pretty conservative and is likely to miss many areas that historically supported vernal pools simply because the imagery and these methods aren't really compatible for identifying areas that belong in cultivation, such as the Ojos Negros area, or areas, coastal terraces between Ensenada and Tijuana that are under houses and for which imagery is not available. So again, loss is about 94%. you're interested in getting more information on this, there will be a paper coming out hopefully next year. So I just want to touch on a few other aspects of the project, those other three aspects that I mentioned. We were very interested in better understanding the flora of these areas, and the goal is a paper describing the flora, a checklist, a voucher-based checklist. So we've surveyed quite a bit over the last 4 years, and we'll continue as long as we can keep going down there. And we're vouchering all plants in every pool complex, and we're especially keen on documenting the endemic packs of Baja California. There's strong motivation for doing this. Baja flora searches reveal that there's really only a little over 200 or so collections made from vernal pools in Baja California across the institutions that were searchable. That's not a lot. So over a quick summary of our floristics, we're documenting all the vernal pool complexes we visit in triplicate. We've got about 400 or so sheets, and we've been able to document important populations for many of these plants that are endemic or are of conservation concern in Alta California as well, but that go across the border. And I'll just touch on a few of the ones that I'm excited about. So here's one that was a undescribed Pogagi species from Valle de las Palmas. This was discovered by Scott McMillan in the 90s, but really no one had collected it or been to it for 20 or so years. So we were able to document that these populations are still doing well despite clay mining in the area. Hopefully someone in the room is going to be working on a species description for this plant soon. Discovered a new species of Plagiabothris down in the Colonet area, unlike any Plagiabothris that I know. And in the San Quintin region, around the same time that Scott, Mark's laughing. Around the same time that Scott discovered the Pogagini, another SDSU person, Kim Marsden, found an Orangium that requires description, and we're potentially working on that. You be the judge of what it looks like. Okay, we're also working on vegetation analysis. This is Isaac Solomesh, who you may know from UC Davis, and we're just getting going. We've only gathered 80 plots, but 80 plots is a lot for a small crew in a short period of time. And we're hoping to continue this year. We have funding through GG Foundation to continue this year. The ultimate goal is to integrate this across the border with this enormous Releve data set that they have. And Isaac is very excited to tell us every time we go out that we've got novel plant assemblages here. So he'll probably be doing some description of the vegetation communities there. And finally, conservation. That's really the whole point of this. And so I've talked a lot about the scientific research part, but this really permits our informed triage for how we're going to approach conservation of vernal pools. We're going to continue to lose them, so where do we put our efforts? There's also been some developments on community education, and you heard Gabby's talk on species listing under Mexican ESA. So one more thing on research that I want to point out, I'm really excited about, is that we've got nascent and growing partnerships with Mexican universities. Really, the goal of this is to work across the border for this flora that we all care, and this ecosystem that we care deeply about. Maria Clara Arteaga is a new professor at CSSA, and she has a graduate student working on fairy shrimp genetics now. It's very exciting. And Jorge Montiel, who's here somewhere, did his master's. He was a master's student at CSSA, and maybe will be a master's student at UC Merced. Worked on rare plants of vernal pools of Baja. And then we're working with this guy. You probably recognize Cesar. So Cesar and I are working on translating both the language and the biota of the really famous and effective Sac Splash program. It's a vernal pool education curriculum that's for the Central Valley predominantly. Translating it into Spanish, and then doing a biotic translation for northwestern Baja California, so that this program can be deployed in Tijuana and Ensenada. And so this is actually happening. We're doing this now. And then finally, Gabby mentioned a bunch of Dudleya species, the Schenopodium, and 3 vernal pool species were proposed for listing under the NOM 59. And I'm very hopeful that among these 3 things that we have basically coverage for all of the vernal pools of Baja, with one of these occurring in every single vernal pool that I know of in Baja California. So that may be something that provides protection for vernal pools going forward. So it started out with just a small group of us, but now there's a great big contingent of people who are working. I'm happy to say that most of these people here are Mexican scientists, and that's what it's going to take, people on the ground who know the biodiversity very well. I'd just like to thank everybody pictured here in this image, and some folks who aren't pictured, and UC Nexus, NSF, and especially GG for funding. Thanks very much. I'll take questions if you have questions.